Hello, everyone. This is Lauren Steiner. Welcome to tonight's edition of The Robust Opposition. My guest tonight is Alan Geraci, and he is, like me, a fellow Bernie Sanders delegate. And unlike me, he has decided to run for office. And he is running for California State Assembly in the 75th District here in California. How are you tonight, Alan?
Hi, Lauren. I'm terrific. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm really honored that you're here with me in this last week, right before the important election. So I want to get right down to it and have you tell the viewers all about yourself, why you decided to run for office, and what the campaign's been like. But why don't we start with your background? Where are you from? How long have you lived in California? What do you do for a living? That sort of stuff.
Well, I was born in New York. I was raised in New York. I went to school in New York. Graduated from State University of New York in Albany and came out here to go to law school. Graduated from law school in 1982, whereupon I became a deputy city attorney in San Diego, worked there for 5 years. And since then, I've been pretty much in private practice. So I've had a pretty diversified practice since 1994. I presently do bankruptcy, estate planning, and general civil litigation.
You were telling me about some really interesting cases that you've got going right now, two of them in particular. Would you like to share that with the viewers?
Sure. There's a lot of detail on my website about these cases, but a lot of your viewers will know that 2 years ago, after the California presidential primary, I took on a case against the Registrar of Voters here in San Diego, representing Citizens Oversight and Ray Lutz, in a case where we fought the post-election audit issue, which is basically after each election cycle, the registrar is supposed to take a sample, a 1% sample of all of the ballots to confirm that the automated count is correct. And Ray discovered that he was only taking 1% of the ballots that were received before Election Day, leaving out more than half the ballots in the sampling, which is a statistical flaw. So we took him to court, and we achieved a judgment to order that the registrar properly do the audit and confirm that the election results were correct. And it was on appeal. And during the process of our appeal, 840 got passed last session, where the legislature decided basically to undo our judgment and make law what they were actually doing, which was the incorrect post-election audit. So one of the things I want to do when I get to Sacramento is fix that. The other case I've been working on is a case against the city of Escondido. Last year we filed it. The city of Escondido, in their wisdom, decided to privatize their public library by basically turning it over to a private vendor, day-to-day management. And the citizens of Escondido were not happy with that. So we are now in court. I have a trial date pending in February against the city of Escondido, challenging their violation of the education code, which says that the public library shall be managed by a board of trustees. So we've got a lot going on there.
Well, that's very interesting, because this is the first time I've ever heard of them trying to privatize public libraries. I've heard about what's going on in Detroit with the Fine Art Museum. I've heard about what happened in Chicago with the parking meters. And I know that a lot of people want to sell off things. A lot of cities are very short-sighted, and they think that they're going to make money, by privatizing something, and it ends up being a bad deal for them. So, yeah.
That's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly the case here. You summarized it rather well. I personally think the whole privatization movement is a slippery slope all around. Of course, we know Congress wants to privatize Social Security and other public enterprise, but when the cities start doing it and they start taking our institutions and making them privatized, we basically lose the power of using them as a public commons.
Yes, and that happened with a lot of water systems, and they were able to reverse that because they could see that the water bills went up and the quality of the water went down. And, Nestle is really getting a lot of access to our water for a song here in California, and we really need to fight that. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I'm with you.
getting to why you decided to run for office, because you're in a very heavily Republican district. It's pretty inland. I looked at the map. You're not at all on the coast. That's 76. She won with 60% of the vote 2 years ago. Why did you decide to run, and why do you think you have a chance?
All good questions. Well, I've never run for office before. As you pointed out in your introduction, in 2016, I was a Bernie Sanders delegate and went to Philadelphia during that escapade. And when I came back, and after the November election, when we had a new president elect, I decided that I needed to do something. I really felt that something in our district needed to happen. So I did a little research. I actually looked at the voting habits. And while I was working on that case I outlined for you against the Registrar of Voters, I discovered that Bernie Sanders achieved 75% of the no party preference voters in the district. Because as you know, in California, no party preference voters are able to vote in the presidential primary, and they get to elect which primary they want to vote in. So 75% of those participating voted for Bernie Sanders. So I did a little homework. I made some phone calls to some of these voters, a lot of the voters, and asked them why they voted for Bernie Sanders. And I realized that there is a left-leaning independent electorate here, and it just needs to be awakened and motivated, and they will vote progressively. So armed with that information, I decided to run for state assembly. Marie Waldron is the incumbent here. She's not had a serious challenger in the 6 years that she's held office. So I'm the first one to actually vigorously challenge her. And she is, for the first time, campaigning. I don't think she's done that before. So we're pretty excited about what's going on in the district. The whole idea that we have a national blue wave and we have an energized Democratic electorate also added to the information pool that led to my decision to run.
Well, you've got some neighbors down there who are running also in Republican districts who are narrowing the gap, such as Margie Castellano, such as Amar Kampa-Najjar, such as James Zelaya. And, they're all running pretty competitive races right now in Republican districts. And then, of course, on the congressional level, it looks as if Mike Levin is going to win Darrell Iss's seat. So tell us how you campaign. In addition to going after independent voters, do you have any positions? Are you running on a straight Bernie Sanders platform with all the progressive positions, or do you differ in any way to try to appeal to Republicans or more conservative voters? Like I know Liz Warren, for instance, is in favor of Prop 6, which would repeal the gas tax because the gas tax is regressive.
Well, I am by nature a progressive. I've been a progressive my entire life. Once upon a time, we used to say we were liberal, and I still say that. Growing up in New York, it was more the norm than when I moved out here and discovered that there were a lot of right-leaning voters out here. But I'm running a progressive campaign. I care about healthcare for all. I care about strong public schools. I care about affordable housing. And all of those issues are progressive issues. I don't take corporate PAC money in my campaign, which leads to a lot of small donors. And I believe in these issues. These are my values. These are the values that I wish to run on and be elected on. And I'm anxious to get to Sacramento to put those values to work.
So what would be the 3 policy priorities that you would have if you got elected to the state assembly? And what committees would you want to be working on?
Yeah. Well, I care about healthcare for all. I think that we can finally get a package together that can be fully funded, even with the resistance of the speaker. I think it can be done. I have studied it. I have met with a lot of economists on the issue who talk about how to pool the trust funds and how to get the last $40 billion that they estimate into the coffers to make sure that everyone has health care. I fundamentally believe that health care is a right of all Californians, and I want that right to exist in our laws. The second priority will be public schools. I am dismayed at the fact that our public school system is not being fully funded, and have some ideas as to how we can get proper funding to all of our schools utilizing the local control funding formula, which, as you know, is the method by which now we calculate funding for schools. I want to see our public schools and our teachers and our classified employees be protected as they are under the law, but I also want to see programs like art and sports and music be funded fully in our school system. I don't believe that charter schools should be receiving public funds. I don't disagree that charter schools should exist, but they should not be sharing our public funding to our schools. So I have some ideas as to how I wish to get schools fully funded. I'd love to be on major committees. Obviously, as a lawyer, I believe I can be helpful in the Judicial Committee. I'd like to be on the Budget Committee. I'd like to be on the Healthcare Committee.
Well, I'm glad you said that about charter schools, because I've been fighting charter schools since 2014. Here in Los Angeles, they're taking away $500 billion a year, I should say $500 million a year from the public schools. And originally, they were supposed to be limited to 10 charter schools in a big city like Los Angeles, and now there's well over 200. And Eli Broad, of course, I call him the Betsy DeVos of Los Angeles, because he's a billionaire that his Broad Foundation, funds, they have superintendent schools, and we got a hold of their handbook, and they teach these superintendents how to close down schools. And he funds these AstroTurf groups like Parent Revolution, which uses the parent trigger law. Like, if you can get 51% of the parents, you can shut down the school, fire the principal, or go charter. So there's a huge assault on public education. And, there are, in Los Angeles, we call them affiliated charters that are under the control of LAUSD. And they have to hire unionized teachers, and they have to be accountable to a publicly elected body. So I think that, people that are calling for just transparency and accountability of charter schools are not asking for enough, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, the accountability statutes are important because we now have charter schools receiving funding, and we must make sure that they are accountable to the public, just like public schools are. However, I agree that ultimately we need to change how the local control funding formula is being utilized, and make sure our public schools are receiving the full funding that they deserve.
Yes. Now, what are some of the issues that are very specific to your district that you have taken a stand on that are resonating with voters down there?
Number one is traffic. As exists in many jurisdictions, we have a situation where our county and cities are allowing development to occur without mitigating factors for traffic and schools and water and fire safety and all of the things that matter in the community. And the burden gets shifted to the taxpayers after these houses are all built and occupied. So the number one issue that I hear from Temecula down to Escondido is, what are you going to do about the damn traffic? And I tell them that what I'm going to do, and what I've already done, is I've met with the Department of Transportation. There is already in plan a light rail system that will go from Temecula down to Mission Valley, basically going down the median of the Interstate 15. And it just needs the political will to lift it up and get it out of the Department of Transportation and get it into committee and get it done. It'll create jobs in the district and will help with the traffic problems that we have along the I-15 corridor. Many people in Temecula commute out of Temecula down to San Diego to work. So this will be a huge benefit to Temecula.
Now, what is your position on the high-speed rail? Do you think it should be finished?
I'm not a big fan of the high-speed rail because I believe we need to take care of our communities first. Yes, I think the bullet train is a good idea from LA to San Francisco as a commuter train. I don't have large disagreement with it, but I'd like to see our transportation dollars working in our districts directly, and light rail is the way to go to get commuters from home to work and back every night, and that's what I believe we should be doing with our transportation dollars now.
Now, what about the bus system? Here in Los Angeles, the bus system is severely underfunded, and that's really the way most poor people get around. They're putting a lot of money into the subways, and the subways don't seem to go anywhere that people want to go. Although I think when they build that subway to the sea, the one that goes to Santa Monica, that should be pretty useful for people. But you know, they tend to fund these big construction projects because the construction companies make money, the engineering firms make money, the building trades unions, people get jobs. But sometimes the solution is very low tech, like buses.
Yeah, well, you know, working with SANDAG, which here in San Diego is the interagency for transportation, I think we can increase the bus lines and make it easier for people to take buses. The problem with the bus system as it exists here in San Diego County right now is it's just not feasible. You know, it takes 2 hours for you to go, you know, 17 miles. And that's not a feasible solution for the average commuter who's trying just to get from home to work and back. So you have to have solutions that are feasible, that make sense, that are expanded, and that are cost efficient. And working with SANDAG and as a state assembly member, I know that we can expand the bus system, not only in Riverside County, but in San Diego County.
Now, what's your position on the Delta tunnels, the twin tunnels? Are you for it or against it?
You know, I haven't given that a lot of thought because, of course, that's out of my district. I followed some of the debate back and forth about it. So I'll pass on that one.
Okay, good. I'll tell you afterwards why I'm against it.
Okay.
Food and Water Watch has turned me against that, as has the group Restore the Delta. It's not going to get us any new water, and the Los Angeles County ratepayers are going to end up paying for it. I mean, even the Central Valley, which is going to benefit from it, decided they didn't want to pay for it. And the WMD here in Los Angeles seems to want to take on the whole cost, which is crazy. I think somebody's getting a kickback there. But let me ask you about a couple more issues before we get into how the campaign is going. So What's the situation with housing down there? I mean, in the entire state, in the entire country, everybody is saying the rent is too damn high. We're all working really hard to pass Proposition 10. But of course, the real estate industry and the apartment owners industry are spending heavily against it, lying to the people about what it's going to be. What's your situation with housing down there? Are you for Prop 10? What solutions do you support?
You know, housing is just another one of those fundamental needs. And the people here in San Diego, in particular, my district, are suffering. They can't afford the housing that is being built. The city of San Marcos, the city of Escondido, and the city of Temecula have been passing plan exclusions, plan exemptions to allow market development, but haven't been building affordable housing along the corridors where people will use transportation. So that's the fundamental need that we have for housing here in the district. And that's part of the plan that I've proposed. If people look at my website, I call it the Smart Growth Plan. And it takes into consideration the fact that California continues to grow. We're going to be a state of 50 million people by the year 2050. And with the existing housing shortage we have now, and the fact that more jobs are being created than homes in the state of California, same is true in my district here, we're going to continue to have this problem unless we meet it head on. You know, if you add the problems of homelessness and other factors of home building, we've got a problem. Yes, I support Prop 10. We need rent control. The cities should have that power to decide how they're going to structure housing in their cities, depending on the needs of their citizens. So Prop 10 offers that solution in getting rid of some bad law that forbids cities to control rents. So I favored Prop 10. I favor Props 1 and 2, which will yield bond money to the affordable housing development. I believe that if we structure a smart growth plan that includes giving some tax incremental planning to developers so that they will build affordable housing, they will build it. One thing I've learned in my experience as an attorney and a citizen in this community, that if you create the economic forces for developers to do things, they will do it. They're not going to do it simply because you tell them we need it. So if you create the economic factors like tax increment financing and other financial methods, they will build the affordable housing that we need, and we can meet those housing demands that exist here in the district.
Well, I don't like to disagree with my guests, but I could argue with you about market-based mechanisms for incentivizing. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with cap and trade. I think regulations are what's needed, and public investment, which is why I'm supporting Public Bank LA, which is Measure B on our ballot on Tuesday, because I feel that if something is in the public good, the public should pay for it. And when we do this all the time with taxes, and they end up, we give tax breaks to Walmarts or to the Staples Center or to any other kind of development. And it's great for a bunch of short-term, high-paying construction jobs, but then the other jobs are, low-paying service jobs, minimum wage jobs. And I feel like Jerry Brown, he got rid of the Community Redevelopment Authority, probably because there was a lot of corruption, but at least that was a public entity that was tasked with creating housing. So I'd like to see us get back to something like that.
Yeah. Let me just interrupt to say to you that we don't disagree. I think a public bank is actually part of my smart growth plan. If we institute a public bank, we can actually create the incentives utilizing a public bank to have this housing built, using development funds. So we agree. I think that's an important fact. I believe in regulation as well, but I also think that in order to get the numbers that we need, we have to create economic forces to create incentives for especially middle-class housing.
Yeah, there's a lot of other things too with housing. I would like to see foreign ownership limited, prohibited like it is in other countries, unless you're going to live in the house for 6 months or more, because a lot of Chinese are buying all this, luxury real estate, which is creating a false, increase in that market. And people are not, the whole thing is if you build more and there's a glut, then the prices are going to go down, but that's not actually happening. And then, of course, the other thing is Airbnb. We have to create some regulations against Airbnb because we're losing a lot of low-income apartment buildings here in Los Angeles, especially in Venice on the beach, because they find they can make more money by turning the units into Airbnb for, tourists. And it's taken the city now, it's been 3 years, and they still haven't voted on these really good regulations. So, again, money in politics,
How's it looking for Prop B in LA?
I think Prop B is looking good. I'm worried about Prop 10, though, because of how much money is being spent with all this false advertising. I want to ask you about one more issue,
Sure.
Immigration, because you're closer to the Mexican border than I am, and I'm sure you have a lot of conservatives in your district. And Trump is down there, wanting to build the wall and wanting to have 50,000 troops to stop the caravan. So what is your position on immigration? I mean, I'm not for open borders. I know a lot of progressives are, but I'm not. So where do you stand on this issue?
I am not for open borders. I believe that the comprehensive immigration reform bill that was going to be put on the floor in 2007 should have been passed. And we would have at least ended the debate about the citizenship of the 12 million undocumented immigrants, and we would have increased the security measures at the border that are very important to the conservative friends that I have in the district. So I'm dismayed at the fact that Congress keeps kicking the political football for one purpose, is because they like to use it as fodder for each election cycle. And it's really aggravating to my voters here in the 75th Assembly District, because many of them believe that the comprehensive immigration reform bill that was not put on the floor and voted on in 2007 would have solved many problems here in San Diego and all across the southern border.
But do they also recognize that we're causing a lot of these problems in Central America, and even going back further with NAFTA, by destabilizing these countries and causing these immigrants? Do they understand that it's a humanitarian crisis and it's not just people are coming to California for economic reasons? Well, it was Mexico and NAFTA, but you know, the Central American drug situation. Anyway, go on.
Most constituents here in the 75th District don't understand the foreign policy implications as to how this crisis is being created in South America and Central America vis-a-vis immigration and refugee status here in America. A lot of them take the fuel that is burning in the conservative world about hating the fact that people are coming up here to take over our country and take our jobs. And, you know, I got to say the conservative right wing has done a job at creating a misinformation campaign over the last 2 decades. And it's going to take a lot of work in Congress to undo a lot of that damage. But meanwhile, let's get a comprehensive immigration bill passed. I've already made my friend Amar promise me that he's going to take that out as his first assignment when he gets to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, well, if he would stop running to the center and start going back to the left, you know, maybe he would get in. But right now he's taking the advice of the Democratic Party consultants, which leads me to my next question. How has the Democratic Party in California helped you or not helped you since you declared?
Well, you know, obviously, I'm not getting the direct impact funding from a lot of the PACs that would help my campaign greatly. So, but you know, they've done some things for me that I'm very grateful for. They've initiated what they call the Blue Wave program and are helping with some of the printed literature and texting campaign and some of the other things that we need at this last minute to entice people to get out and vote. So, you know, could they do more? Absolutely, they should be doing more. I'm a little dismayed at the fact that they pick and choose their candidates the way they do, but I suppose that's no different than anything else in life. And I just chagrin and I just move on, and I realize that I've got a job to do, and whether they help me or they don't help me, I'm going to get it done.
Now, a lot of progressive candidates that aren't getting help from the party are getting help from our Revolution chapters, Democratic Socialist of America chapters, Progressive Democrats of America chapters, certain progressive labor unions. Who is endorsing you and who is helping you get out the vote?
Well, that I'm blessed to have the support of almost all of the unions here in San Diego County that I've asked for endorsement, including teachers and nurses and labor council and classified employees and state employees, et cetera. And I am endorsed by 2 Revolution chapters here in San Diego County, along with a lot of the indivisible chapters as well. And they offer volunteer help. They offer support in many ways. A lot of them are contributing to my campaign financially with small donations, and I'm very grateful for that. So the people motivated movement that I've been experiencing as part of my first experience as a candidate has been very rewarding. I've made a lot of new friends, I've met a lot of people that I'm very proud to know. And so I'm very pleased with the fact that I have the support of the unions and the organizations in San Diego County.
Well, that's great. And I wish you all the success. I hope you are swept up in the blue wave that I hope sweeps up the rest of the California and the country. next Tuesday. So thank you very much for being on my show, Alan.
Lauren, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too.